a child that is of help to others and does not hurt anyone, that they are practicing Muslims, that they should be good practicing Muslims. For them to distinguish between good and bad, benefit their community, be confident and secure, show respect to everyone, a balanced individual who is able to maintain religion, self-respect, and show the best to others. Child, raise them keeping this in mind, good manners, successful and mindful that every step should be for Allah. So exactly, these are really great long-term goals, right? So what we try to do in these online courses is really take these goals and um, put them into concrete steps that parents can do, the things that parents can do in order to achieve these things, right? And obviously, you know, uh, for many of us, the ultimate goal is that they should be soldiers of Imam Zamana, right? And again, all of the things that people were talking about before this obviously is, they all mean the same thing in many ways, right? Because if you have good manners and akhlaq, if you show respect, if you have a balanced um, view of self and the community, then, you would be closer to Allah, you would be a soldier of Imam Zamana, and you would have long-term success. So, this was a long time ago when we um, had just polled a couple of older and younger parents about what they want for the children. One of the nicest sayings was by an older lady who said that I want to be able to deliver my child to the doors of Jannah. So, I always tried to keep that in mind as I was parenting my own children, and I think it's a good inspirational kind of quote to remind ourselves about what our ultimate goal is. And also to recognize that entry into Jannah is on the basis of God consciousness and good character, right? So again, basically being close to God, having taqwa, and having good akhlaq. So let's talk a little bit about what this course means and why do we need it? Because inshallah, in this course we will be talking a lot about materialism, about our own how our own material well-being has impacted our ourselves and our families. So the idea for this course actually came from a book which is by the same name. And the author of the book is someone by the name of Dan Kindlon, who's a child psychiatrist at Harvard University. And what he did, which was a little bit different, he is again a social researcher, and more social research, he says, based on what makes children fail, or when I'm talking about failure, I'm talking about moral failure more than anything else. When children go off track, he said a lot of the research was about children who came from disadvantaged backgrounds, which had, either they came from a lot of poverty, they came from mothers who were addicted to substances, it came from families of broken homes, again, from extreme poverty. And what he said was that in his experience, a lot of the families that he saw actually did not come from these backgrounds. They came from very affluent homes, and yet they had the same problems. And when I'm talking about problems, I'm referring to things like substance abuse, peer violence, body image issues, um, sexual promiscuity, all these things. So he said that he started doing research on the families of these children who came from so-called good homes or stable backgrounds, and he tried to figure out what went wrong. So again, the idea is that our generation of parents today, we are much better off materially than our parents ever were. Many of us may have struggled initially when we immigrated. For example, some of us who live in the West, we may have immigrated initially and suffered um, a little bit of, hard times. Can people not hear me? Okay, so it seems that some people can hear okay, which means the trouble is not from my end. So, the people who are having trouble hearing can, please try and maybe close some programs, or, maybe you have more than one window open, and that sometimes impacts quality. So, we may have struggled initially, but at this point, a lot of us are definitely, materially more better off than our parents were, right? Our children have access to vastly greater material resources and opportunities than we had growing up, for sure, because we all know, I mean, that's the path that the world is taking generally, that material resources. I mean, there's a lot more inequality for sure, and the poor have actually become poorer, but that's a whole different subject. But for a lot of people, our children definitely have more things than we ever did, right? And the question to ask ourselves again, is that a good thing? The title of this is too much of a good thing, right? So we need to ask ourselves this idea of uh, access to material resources, is that such a good thing? And I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that before we move on. So, firstly, do you agree that we are better off materially than our children, than our parents used to be? Okay. So, anything in access is not good, depending on the way it's being used. Um, my impression from my parents is that they were happier in the childhood because they had few things and they cherished them. Cannot change what is out of balance, what is out there, but balance is the key. I think it's a bigger challenge. Okay. Good as offers more opportunities to better oneself. Again, all of these are really valid, because I think that, again, the key to remember is that yes, we definitely, I mean, I think very few people would agree that, would disagree that our children have more than we did. And definitely it does give access to uh, us to better opportunities to better ourselves in terms of education. So the idea again, there's a lot of talk today about what makes, our children today materialistic. And I think this is a relevant question to ask, because, often we say that children have moved away. And again, let's just first define what we mean by materialistic. Materialism simply means that you value things and outside appearances more than you value spiritual values and your core values, character, things like that. um, because of so many materialistic things, children don't feel that they have enough. So, UNICEF actually did a study on this, and what they found was that materialism is thought to be a cause as well as an effect of negative well-being. What does that mean? Negative well-being simply means if the child um, feels, has a social or emotional problem. What they found was that that can lead to an excess of attention to the material things, as well as when there is an excessive attention to material things, it can also lead to to negative well-being. So basically, it's a vicious cycle, right? And negative well-being would include things like anxiety, depression. You know, I'm sure many of us are aware that teenage depression and anxiety is at record numbers today. A lot of children struggle with feelings of depression, with feelings of inadequacy, with body image issues. There is also something called digital depression, which is thought to be linked to over dependence on on electronic gadgets. Um, what the study found was that although children wanted the newest toys and gadgets, they rarely wanted them for their own sake. In other words, they tended to fulfill a certain purpose in children's lives, right? Whether it was utilitarian, which means simply that, what the use was. So, for example, if you want a laptop computer, you may want it because you actually need it for school. Or it could be a symbolic and social reason why they wanted them. What that means is that many children it was found that many, especially preteens and teens, wanted the brand or wanted a specific thing because it would confer a social status. Like people would look up to them, or it would lead to, again, related to that, it would be to stop bullying. So it was very interesting, what how even children perceived that having a certain thing, even if they didn't really want it for their own sake, for example, the brand new a pair of Nike shoes or the equivalent of jeans or whatever, it was that others would look upon them as something to look up to, and it would decrease in peer violence or in bullying. And it was what was really interesting was that even 14-year-olds, children as young as 14, agreed that their well-being centered on time with a happy, stable family, with having good friends and plenty to do, especially outdoors. So this was a really interesting finding in the sense that children, even pretty young teens, recognized that it was not things that was making them happy. When asked to choose, what they would want, it appeared that they were pretty clear that it was what the things that really valued or mattered was a stable family, having friends, having a range of activities in their lives. However, another study, this one done by Reuters, found that youth actually tend to, unfortunately, become more materialistic as they grow. So, for example, when they measured preteens with teenagers, they found that teens, even within a span of 2 years, tended to value material things much more as they grew older. So this is an important thing to keep in mind that those of us with young children may think, what, this is not something that is impacting my family, but it could simply be that your children are not yet in the age group. However, at least in my own experience, I have found that children as young as 8 or 9 or 10 can be extremely aware of the trappings of social status. They would be aware of the kind of car, for example, their friends' parents drive, which again, for a 10 or an 8-year-old to be aware of something that, it is a disturbing sign. And, if we don't address it, it certainly would become materialistic as they would grow. What the study found, which was extremely interesting and disturbing, was that parents tended to be compulsive about continually buying things for themselves and their children. And this was even though they knew that it was sort of pointless. So when parents were asked about, um, why they were doing it, most parents responded by saying that it was because they couldn't help themselves, or, we'll talk about time, but I think a lot of parents buy things for their children because they themselves are busy, and it is an easy way to feel that you are doing something positive for your children, right? So, this was quite a disturbing, when I studied this, it seemed quite disturbing that even though they recognized that it was not bringing their children happiness, they found themselves unable to control themselves. So now, what has been the impact of this rise in material well-being on our youth and families? And what we're talking about when we say about this rise in material well-being, again, simply means our wider access to resources. Has it um, has it resulted in increased opportunities? Has it resulted in, again, many of us, when we are working in, we tend to tell ourselves that we are doing this because we want to, at some point, um, we're doing it for our family, right? I mean, all of us, when we are working hard and we say that it is because we want a better life, quote unquote, for our children, right? So we obviously, the idea is that if we tell ourselves this, we really need to ask ourselves the question that what actually has been the impact. And obviously, we're not talking about individual families in this case. We are talking about generally what has been the trend in in society. So in terms of um, disciplinary problems, let's just view these as one way of looking at what has happened to the youth culture. So in 1940, when they did a survey of what were the top disciplinary problems in public schools, they found that talking out of turn, chewing gum, making noise, running in the halls, cutting in line, dress code infractions, and littering were the top problems and these were, by the way, reported by teachers. As because I think to some extent, every generation tends to view their youth, quote unquote, as troubled or having issues, right? So these were the issues that the public school teachers were dealing with. When they did that at the end of the last century, what they found was that teachers were not reporting any of these as issues at all. Although, again, if you look at it in terms of Islamic akhlaq, then all of them could be considered to be concerning, right? Especially thinking things like talking out of turn, cutting in line, littering. I mean, these are things which we would expect that good Muslim children, quote unquote, would be conscious of. However, what public school teachers find now is things like drug abuse, alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, theft, cheating, violence, bullying, sexual harassment, gangs, verbal abuse of teachers, and weapons. These are the disciplinary problems reported by teachers, and this was a few years ago that this uh, that this survey was done. So again, um, if we put it in, if we just summarize it, basically there has been a rise of youth violence and crime. There's been an increase in peer cruelty, also known as bullying. There's been a rise in stealing, escalation in cheating. In fact, cheating is such a huge problem in schools that many, unfortunately, it's not only children, but parents actually have, what schools are finding is that parents have a very lax attitude of what constitutes cheating, and they tend to defend their children when, for example, children are caught plagiarizing. There's been an increase in sexual promiscuity and a rise in substance abuse. Now, again, these are obviously this is a mainstream study, right? And often, when as Muslim parents we look at such things which tend to be extremely disturbing, we tell ourselves that yes, but this is not our children. We are somehow protected because we are Muslims. However, in our community, and this was, I am talking about the North American context, when a few years ago, we, you know, there was a study done by a task force in North America about what are the problems that our youth, which is our community youth, face in the world today. And they found extremely similar things, which was the rise of youth violence, an increase in sexual promiscuity, a rise in substance abuse, a rise in breakdown of marital relationships, and the last two were particular to our community. They were not in the mainstream research because they were probably not looking at it. But the fourth one, which is disengagement from community, tends to be a very significant issue for our youth. And many of us who are involved in community settings recognize that it is more and more challenging to bring youth into the community centers today. And there are many reasons for that. I would not, want to go into those today. But basically, again, the impact, obviously, of disengagement from community is that the value system for youth today tends to come less from their own communities, from their own parents, and it tends to come more from the peers that they hang out with. So, what went wrong? Uh, what do you think led to this crisis? It's actually called, some experts call it a crisis of conscience, meaning, again, that when children are engaging in such behaviors, at some point it is their conscience which is failing them. In other words, their conscience or the moral voice inside them is not strong enough to stop them from engaging in these kinds of behaviors. So, what do you think happened? There's a comment. Well, it's challenging, yes, because we do not focus on the age group too. We are to blame too. Actually, I tend to disagree with that because generally, what has happened is in the past, communities and parents, the households, tended to be adult centered. What that means is that, the happiness of children was not a priority in any setting, whether it was the community or whether it was the family. Um, you know, Many of us would agree that our parents did not really worry too much about whether their children were happy or emotionally well adjusted. Actually, society has become a lot more child centered, we tend to um, we tend to focus a lot more on what the needs of children are today and how we tend to adjust our lives to their schedule as opposed to them adjusting to our schedule as it used to be in the past. So again, this is a very common, and I can see that a lot of people agree that we don't have activities of their interest, we don't involve them, but there is another side to the story. So yes, definitely children's needs are different. Well, children's needs actually are not different. Children always needed love, attention, guidance, challenge, training. They've always needed that. So children's needs have really not changed. How those needs are met is definitely changing. But hopefully, I mean, again, what I like about this discussion is that, I mean, my job is again to invite you to think of things in a little bit of different ways. So, it's all these comments may be valid to a large extent. But again, the point is that there is a different way to look at it. And not everything that we just assume to be true may be. So again, it's a good idea to look at research, to look at what the experts say, and then to see whether it is, um, whether it's a match. So we are forgetting that our children need us and not things. That's definitely true. The family unit has changed. Before we used to live in big families and a lot more help. We're impressed with the West. Um, maybe we were given more time and now parents are more busy. Definitely, that is a very key point. I think also lack of our own Islamic teachings and essence. That may or may not be true because a lot of parents tend to have, you know, practicing households, and yet there is a disconnect between, between the parents' values and the children's values. So we need to make sure that we're not lowering our standards just to make children happy. That is a very good point, actually, because again, we will talk a little bit about what actually makes our children happy. We may not be what we think makes them happy. So again, what the research suggests is that the crisis of conscience is basically, if you look at it, there are two main reasons, like two main headings. One is the decrease in protective factors, and the other is increase in risk factors. So what do I mean by that? Protective factors simply mean that there are some things which will protect a child or which will increase the chances that a child maintains values that the parents would like to see. Okay. And the other one is increase in risk factor simply means the risk factor is an increase in a chance that the child will not follow the value system of the child of the parents. Okay. So the protective factors are adult supervision is a huge protective factor for children to make good moral choices. And adult supervision doesn't mean you hover around them, but it means that at some point, because there are two things. One is that we would all want our children to be self-motivating, and that definitely does increase over time. But in the short term, and for some children, supervision is extremely important because children are likely to be good when parents are around, right? Spiritual and religious training is a huge protective factor for many, many different things. But again, in order to follow, and when we're talking about spiritual and religious training, what normally we find is that children are very quick to pick up on a difference between our spoken and lived values. What does that mean? So, for example, if we, talk to them all the time about, what is halal and what is haram, or what is right and wrong, and then yet they see us making choices which are not in line with what we say, that can be, that can really lead them to question the values themselves. Meaningful adult relationships are extremely important. In other words, if you have a good relationship with parents or with other adults who you look up to and who inspire you, and they themselves are living their values, you are, again, that serves as a protective factor. Clear and shared value systems. What does that mean? So, in the old days, for example, all of us lived, or many of us grew up in communities or in societies which had a shared value system. So now, because many of us live, especially those of us who live in the West and who are immigrants, we obviously live in a mainstream society. We live in diverse societies, which in some ways it's really good because they're liberal and therefore they can accept us. But the downside of that is that they are liberal and they have many values which they also accept, which we don't share with them, right? But it's an important point actually to recognize both, because it's very easy to use a youth term diss the entire diversity of culture without recognizing at the same time that that is actually what allows us to thrive in those cultures as well, right? So the more honest we are with our children that it is a double-edged sword, that it is actually both good and bad, the more likely we are to, the more we respect, for example, their lived experience of the good things they see in the culture, the more likely it is that they will make good judgments and they will recognize. Because if we just diss the entire culture wholeheartedly, the children recognize that that's not authentic and that's not really honest, because this culture has given them a lot of things, as well as we ourselves are living in it. The next thing in protective factors is obviously community support, which is a very related to having clear and shared value systems. The whole idea of the village, that it takes a village to raise a child. And the whole, on the flip side of it, the recent idea is that, this minding your own business, the term that it's between me and my God, everyone should look out for themselves. Basically, we have killed the village, or we have destroyed the village that was helping us raise our children. And obviously, parenting, adequate parenting. In other words, inshallah, maybe next week we will be talking about what kind of parents have the best chance, what parenting styles have the best chance of raising children of character. So we will be, inshallah, talking about that as well. So an increase in risk factors. So on the flip side of it, what are the increase in risk factors that have caused this crisis of conscience? A very important thing, which is very new, is obviously the media. And yes, TV has been around for a while, but the whole internet age, the access to information is a very new thing. Actually has changed the playing field completely, so to speak. And the proliferation of mobile media. So even a few years ago, when we started, having the conversation about the internet and the risks of the internet for children, this was even pre-mobile media. In this day and age, it's become, just to give you an example, it was, I think, 2 years ago, or less than 2 years ago, it was about a year and a bit that we did the series on parenting in the age of Facebook and Twitter in the same platform. And, a lot of uh, some of the research I did for that course was based on a particular study. When I re-looked at that study, which has come out again just, I think, last month, the figures were actually astounding. I mean, I thought I was reading wrong. That, for example, mobile phone usage, um, smartphone usage among even pre-teenagers, which is the age group from 8 to 12, has, um, I hope I'm getting this right. I don't have the figures in front of me, but it's, I think, quadrupled in 2 years or something like that. So, I mean, and many of us, we can see that, 5-year-olds playing with iPads, children being on their parents' phone, for example, using it as a toy. So this is, I think something we really, I mean, this is not this is a different course, but we could actually spend the entire 4 weeks about talking about how the media has resulted in the crisis of conscience. That's how important it is. So, and related to that point is obviously the access to deviant moral messages through technology. And this can be, this can happen without any effort whatsoever on the children's part. So, the idea is that they are, obviously, children are curious, and sometimes they may be looking to satisfy their curiosity. At other times, they will be subject to information, to images, to things which they weren't looking for, and they're not ready. They're completely not emotionally or psychologically ready to accept those images, right? But once, that's the thing with, um, the Quran tells us to look to our food. Why? Because it becomes a part of our body, right? And, related to that is we really need to see what information we are putting in through our senses. What are we looking at? What are we listening to? Because that, once you've done it, you cannot undo it. So, for example, when I was talking to a group of parents recently about this, the parents themselves were saying that, there are some images that we wish that we had never seen. So, you can just understand the impact on almost the trauma of a child who's not ready for such information to have that kind of information. The next point, increase in risk factor, is the lack of shared values between peers. So again, we'll talk a little bit later about how peers may impact um, our value system. But again, it is definitely a factor, and that's why in Islam we do talk a lot about, you know, being mindful or being conscious of the kinds of friends we have, because friends do impact us. To what extent we actually parents tend to overestimate the impact of peers on their children, but it is definitely a factor. The rise of youth culture. This is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that the entire culture or the society around us has become extremely youth centered. And this is extremely obvious, for example, in on the internet, because not only are they users of the information, users of um, the information, but they're also the creators of the information. So, for example, uh, a, a place like YouTube or Facebook, it is all user generated content. What does that mean? That the content is actually uh, put up not by adults but by children themselves. So without guidance, you can just imagine, how how amok it can go. First of all, in something that might be initially just done out of curiosity or whatever, without guidance and without the self-reflection, it can really multiply. And again, the whole idea of the youth culture today is that success to them, especially related to media, means how many people view it. And how many people view it obviously has nothing to do with the merit of the content. It's actually the more quirky or strange or weird it is, the more likes, quote unquote, it will get. And that is what many of the youths consider to be success. And this was my point. I think I already mentioned it, that minding our own business has destroyed the village that it takes to raise our children, right? Just to put it, because I know there have been a few comments about what can we do, what can we do about all this. I think, it is important to spend a little bit of time to try and understand where the issues are, because none of this really is a quick fix. And often, like say, for example, if we go to listen to a lecture or we hear a great speaker about how what we can do about it, and yes, the short answer is to get closer to Allah and to follow the book. Definitely, there's absolutely no question about that, right? But often when we are in the day to day, we don't even recognize what the issues are, and therefore we cannot apply the Islamic teachings because we don't recognize that this is a problem. So, for example, how many of us, may be extremely practicing Muslims. We want to do the best for our children, and yet we don't realize that by letting our 5 or 6 or 7 year old play on the iPhone or the iPad, how is that related to what is happening in the mainstream society? That's the reason why we are focusing, why we are focusing on these things. So we have a few minutes left. Let's just go through a few slides, and not to worry, inshallah, we will continue next week. So again, to summarize what is causing this crisis of conscience, it's basically peers. And, peers, we always think of only our children's peers, right? That, when we talk about peer pressure, for example, we rarely recognize that as parents, we are also subject to peer pressure. So, for example, if everyone in our social circle or group is doing something, we are more likely to do it, and that is peer pressure for ourselves. So the peer pressures, media, what we started talking about, and the third is parenting practices. So how important are peers anyway? So, what research finds is that it's a myth that peers influence kids' moral values more than parents do. Definitely, what we're not saying here is that there is no peer influence. There is definitely a peer influence um, on our children. They influence things like dress choices, entertainment. Again, if everyone in your class is watching a particular TV show or a particular YouTube video, you're much more likely to do that. And by the way, now for children's peers, they may not even be so much in real life, because all our children who are, above the age of, I would say, 8, 9, 10, they have an online existence. They all have a virtual existence. And so their peer group may not only be people that we think are their peers, for example, people that they see on a day-to-day basis, but they could have actually online peers which have a great influence in their lives. And unless and until we don't recognize that they have an online existence, we may not, we may completely miss that. Peers obviously definitely influence the language that children use. So, for example, things that are words that are slang, or they're very common. For example, sick. Sick is used as a term which means something really good. And so that definitely comes from peers. However, what um, studies find is that it's the parents who have influence on things like religion, education. So, for example, parents are much more likely to influence a child's education or what courses they take, as opposed to peers, and core values. So, the whole idea about, the Islamic parenting contract, which is, in the first 7 years, that the child should be treated as Sayyid. And, what we find in research is that that's the time when most of the value system of the child is formed without them being conscious of it, right? And that's the time when parents have the greatest influence over the child. So, the core values are, by far mostly affected by by peers. And what again, in Islam, it's broken down into 21 years. And again, what modern research confirms is that after 21 years, it's very unlikely for your personality or values to change significantly. So, for example, if at 25 you meet somebody who is um, impacting you or is having an influence, obviously people grow and change your whole life, right? But it's less likely to influence you to, to a very great degree, especially if you've had that stable background in the beginning. So we've started actually talking about the impact of media already, but let's just finish that off. So children spend more time in front of the TV than they do in any other activity except sleep. So this is important even in the age of the internet. Young children specifically tend to watch more TV than they use the internet. How they watch TV, though, over the years has changed. For example, this whole thing of reality TV is something new. Um, and, children tend to also watch TV on their devices rather than TV watching used to be a shared activity. It used to be a family activity where most families had one TV. Now, a lot of families have multiple TVs to start with. And secondly, a lot of children will watch TV on their laptop or an iPad, which means again they are doing this outside the influence of the parents. So, for example, if you are watching a show with your children in the same room, there is likely that if there is something inappropriate which you might think might impact the value system of the child, you may likely comment on it. Obviously, you cannot do that if they are doing this on their own and or with their peers. Um, so the average child spends 4 hours watching TV and 7 hours consuming all total electronic media, including TV. Now, again, when I was discussing this with my children, none of us could believe that this was true. So we actually checked it up that between 54 and 75 of North American fourth graders have TVs in their bedrooms. And this again is a slightly older statistic. So with the advent of mobile media, this could have changed. TV watching has been also linked to materialism, and we know that big companies such as Google, Apple, and Sony, they've all actually admitted to inappropriate collection and storing of consumer information to target children as consumers. What does that mean? It means that they are actually focusing their advertisement, and all of us may have experienced this, that when we go online, the ads seem to be completely targeted to things that we are looking for or things that we may have looked up. And the idea is that um, when children obviously are much less able to distinguish between an ad and a reality, for example. So, when they are subjected to images and things of wanting things that they've been advertised to, you can't really blame them. So we know that obviously in relationship to developing their character, um, the TV and the internet is a huge issue, right? 83% of TV has sexual content. And these are just like very few examples, right? Grand Theft Auto, the best-selling video game, it's extremely disturbing moral messages. So before 18, the average child will have witnessed 200,000 acts of violence and 16,000 murders. The impact of that is that 8-year-old boys who viewed the most violent programs while growing up were most likely to engage in aggressive behavior by age 18. More than 50% of teens report getting some or most of their information on sex from TV. Yes, they are really scary statistics, and it is, like the first thing for us to is to recognize what we are up against. Because if we keep telling ourselves that what we have good Muslim homes and none of this is related to us, that is actually what uh, puts us the most at risk. Okay. So what is the impact of TV on the unconscious mind? So within minutes of beginning to watch TV, the brain changes from the alert brain waves to the hypnotic waves. What does that mean? That the judgment center of the brain is bypassed. So when a child is watching something, you heard the trance, right? Sometimes we just lie on the couch, or they may lie on the couch and watch hours of TV without really um, filtering any information. In other words, they're not even consciously taking it in. It's all going straight to the unconscious. And when things go straight to the unconscious, it means that you are not able to even distinguish between right and wrong. I really like um, this story, and I think we should end there. Sorry, we're over time. I just realized we're 4 minutes over time already. But let's just tell the story, and then we can end here. So the story of boiling frogs is this: that when you put a frog into boiling water, obviously the frog's instinct is to jump out, and a frog can jump. So it's not going to stay there because he knows that it's uncomfortable and he will be hurt. However, if you put a frog in a pan of room temperature water and you put it on the fire and slowly turn up the heat, the frog does not recognize what is happening because the heat is being very slowly turned up, and before he knows it, the heat is too much for the body and the frog dies. So, the moral message on this is that all of us living in this society, and our children in particular, are like those boiling frogs in the sense that the moral deprivation of society is progressing at such an insidious pace that a lot of things we don't recognize how they are impacting our soul and how they are impacting our morality, till the time when it's almost too late. So, and I think this is a really good story to share with children, when you are trying to explain to them why a certain message or a certain TV program or a movie is not good. And, it does not mean that they are going to stop watching it, but at the very minimum, hopefully, inshallah, we can at least get them to start filtering information. At least we can, Because I know recently we went to watch something as a family, and at the end it was supposed to. I mean, it was very highly rated, the show, whatever it was, and at the end of it, somebody asked my kids, how did you like it? And they said it was a very unsatisfying moral message. And I was actually a bit surprised by that because, again, if you had just got lost if they had not been thinking critically about that, um, that was a difficult conclusion to come to. So let's end here, inshallah, and we will meet again, inshallah, same time next week. And meanwhile, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make, please feel free to email me at marziahassan@hotmail.com. That is marziahassan@hotmail.com. The slides will be put up on the website. They may take a day or so actually because it's difficult to judge how much we cover each week. So once we have done that, we know how many slides to put up for each week, we will do that. So thank you so much. And Jazakallah.